Good morning, everyone. President Biden promised to act fast when it came to stimulus checks for millions of Americans, but that doesn't mean the recipients will be in a hurry to spend it. Any payments from Biden's $1.9 trillion aid bill are much more likely to be saved rather than spent. More than 1/3 of likely recipients plan to stash money for later. That's according to a new survey commissioned by Bloomberg. With me now is Bloomberg's Ms. Elena Igafopoulou and Shonali Bosick. Missy, I want to start with you. You reported on this new poll this morning for Bloomberg News. What are the big takeaways? What did you learn from this morning consult survey that was commissioned by Bloomberg?
Yeah, Tim. So what we're hearing is, people are getting the money, but what they're doing is they're deciding not to spend it. They're deciding to stash it and put it into their savings. And, we got 1/3 of respondents saying, we're going to save the money, we're planning to do this. And that's up from what respondents said they did with their first and second stimulus payments. And so what we're seeing here is this trend of the more money the government gives people, the more they're sort of saving. So the savings rate is going up. And the question is that a good thing or a bad thing for the economy? And
Right, and on its surface, the idea of a savings rate going up is a good thing because it means that Americans don't necessarily need the money. But on the other hand,
it matters a lot where that sort of savings rate is concentrated. And we're seeing some sort of discrepancy between higher income households and how much money they're saving, which is about 41%, and lower income households, they're saving about 29%. And so we're seeing this sort of savings rate more concentrated in people that, are more affluent. And the question here is, what happens to the people that really need this stimulus money immediately? That savings is sort of helping people in the lower income households pay for things down the line, like credit card debt. And so it's definitely something that helps them. But again, it's concentrated at the top percentage.
So what would the takeaway be for policymakers here? The ones who say essentially, hey, this thing needs to be more targeted. Are they right about that?
So a lot of moderate Democrats are saying, let's cap it at $50,000 instead of doing the $75,000 and $1,500 for household, or $150,000 for households. Let's cap it at 50, and let's give the help to a lot more people that might need it more immediately. And I think that definitely backs up that argument.
Shonali Bosick, come on in here. We've talked a lot with you about the K-shaped recovery, the idea that the haves and have-nots have really recovered from the coronavirus pandemic, the recession induced by it, a lot differently. How does this poll that Missy talked about, that was commissioned by Bloomberg, how does this feed into that narrative of a K-shaped recovery?
Well, what's interesting, Tim, is the second biggest thing people want to use their money on is food. So that if you look at that compared to the savings rate, you see that there still really is a need for money to get basic necessities to live off of. The other thing about this is that we're not talking about millionaires here, right? We're talking about people who make a little over $100,000 versus the people who make less than $50,000. Every step of the way you go in these income brackets, you're seeing more and more disparities. And when you see people saving money, what you really see there is fear of the future. What do jobs look like coming out of this? Are they going to have a job coming out of this? Are they going to be able to afford their lifestyle? What are rents going to look like, and is there going to be inflation? There's a worry baked in here, Tim, and my favorite part of all of this is it's inefficient to put money into a savings account right now. They're not going to earn you much money back. It's not like you're putting money into the stock market. It's not like you are putting money into buying Bitcoin. Those are other worries people have. Saving money doesn't yield much. It is just saving money for a rainy day.
Right, because interest rates are so low. Shonali, talk a little bit about this idea that you've reported so much on small businesses, on the struggles that small businesses have faced. Was there anything in this survey that showed you that, hey, this is like affecting this group of people, but not at all affecting this other group of people?
Well, that's an interesting question, Tim, especially as it pertains to small businesses. Why? Because we know that most small business owners right now are dipping into their personal savings to be able to pay for their employees' paycheck, to be able to meet taxes and rent, right? So the fact that people are saving more at that income bracket shouldn't be surprising when you think about it that way, right? A lot of people who own businesses now, which was the primary job creator coming into 2020, are dipping into their own savings and finding struggles financially.
Missy, come back in because I want to talk about inflation. We heard from Fed Chair Jerome Powell yesterday. He was speaking at the Economic Club of New York look, all ears and eyes were on him uttering talking about inflation. But he said yesterday that he doesn't expect a sustained surge in prices when the economy reopens. In other words, he doesn't expect to see inflation because of demand when the economy does reopen. How do these survey results take into account the idea of inflation with people holding on to their money rather than spending it?
Right. So the idea is if you're saving your money, the idea is you spend it down the line. And, with this sort of pent up demand from folks who haven't been spending their money in this past year because they've been hunkering down at home, and this idea that, basically they're, hunkering down at home, they're not spending their money, there's pent-up demand, vaccines are in the horizon, they're getting ready to sort of come back into the economy, they're not spending their money all at once, they're sort of feeding it into the economy slowly, and that's really sort of, bringing down those concerns about any inflation and this sort of like consumption spending stampede that a lot of economists were, worried about when these first and second stimulus packages were coming in.
So does holding on to the stimulus checks, a greater number of people doing that than previously, does that help or hurt the economy overall?
I mean, the interesting part about this is that we don't really know because there's never really been a parallel like this. We've never been in this situation before. But for the most part, right now, I think while the consensus before was, spend your money as fast as you can because we need to stimulate the economy right now, I think people are starting to feel more comfortable with the idea, save it, slowly bring it out into the economy. It'll maintain it for longer and it'll help you sort of have a backup, depending on what happens to the economy moving forward.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to see the way that our habits have changed during this pandemic, becoming more conservative with savings, among many other things that we are doing now. Bloomberg's Mr. Lena Igafopoulou and Shonali Bosick, thanks to both of you for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.